Hello everyone and welcome to Powerhouse. I'm your host, Sophie B, and a big thank you for joining me on today's episode of Dragon Ball AU, where we take a look at some what-ifs that alter the timeline of the Dragon Ball world.
On the last episode of Dragon Ball AU, Frieza killed Gohan, triggering Goku's transformation into a Super Saiyan, and leading to the Tyrant's defeat. Shortly after the others returned to Earth, Bulma offered Vegeta a place to stay, but was interrupted by Krillin, who deemed the prince not yet trustworthy enough to have unwatched, and volunteered to serve as his roommate. The warriors developed a rivalry and even the start of a friendship as their strength continued to grow. Unfortunately, Frieza and his father, King Cold, managed to find Earth, but before the Z fighters could even try to fight them, a young woman with a suspiciously similar appearance to Bulma suddenly appeared. Swiftly dealing with the duo using a form of Kaioshin none had ever seen, the girl told the group of Goku's pending arrival. When the Saiyan returned, she revealed all. Her name was Bulla, the daughter of Krillin and Bulma from the future, who'd come from a time where two androids hold the world in the grip of terror. Telling him that the warriors of Earth have 3 years before the androids appear, she gave Goku both medicine for his future heart disease, as well as a formula to help treat Krillin's future negative side effects from Kaioshin, and left in her time machine as suddenly as she'd appeared. With the android threat looming on the horizon, our heroes begin their preparations. How will they make use of the time allotted to them? Find out on today's episode of Dragon Ball AU!
Now, before we launch into the events of the 3-year time skip proper, I want to take the time to address a few things that were not as fleshed out in the last episode, as well as they could have been. The first is the character of Gohan. Death may be cheap in DBZ, but dying at the hands of a galactic tyrant at the age of 6-ish would no doubt leave a mark on one's psyche, which is to say nothing of how Chi-Chi would react to the knowledge that her child perished on his journey into space. The events of Planet Namek will have consequences for the Sun family, and those consequences will be explored later in this episode. The second thing to address is the nature of the curative formula Bulla brought back to deal with Krillin's eventual and otherwise irreversible muscle atrophy from Kaioshin. Basically, when Trunks appears in the canon, he defeats Frieza, Cold, all of their men, and destroys Frieza's spacecraft. In the case of Bulla, I intentionally didn't describe her destroying the spaceship because she doesn't. Instead, she leaves the ship intact for a big reason, so that her mother could acquire and make use of healing tank technology. In her timeline, future Bulma had to struggle with damaged technology, nevertheless managing to develop a treatment and eventually a cure purely on the strength of her genius. But the process took many years, and Krillin was ultimately unable to even benefit from its development prior to his death. Thus, she entrusted Bulla with her notes and a sample of the restorative formula, and instructed her daughter not to destroy the technology on Frieza's vessel so that the Bulma of the past would have every means to develop the treatment in only a few years' time, and ensure that Krillin wouldn't suffer permanent damage from Kaioshin. And if anyone thinks such advanced muscle degeneration might be too much for the healing tank technology, even with Bulma's advanced formula, let us not forget that when Sorbet later arranged for the return of Frieza in Resurrection F, his Emperor was explained to have returned to life in the physical state he died in, which would be little more than toasty chunks of meat they had to stuff into a tank. And that worked, so I don't think I'm overreaching here to think that 20 years down the line, Bulma could have perfected this tech. The third thing to address is the other humans. While awaiting the renewal of the Namekian Dragon Balls, Yamcha, Tien and Chaozu continued to train on King Kai's planet in Otherworld. Even with 130 more days worth of training in 10 times gravity, and the added incentive to learn Kaioshin, they are quite a ways behind the rest of the group when it comes to their power, mostly on account of the fact that they cannot account for Saiyan Zenkai boosts or the unlocking of Krillin and Gohan's potential by Guru. With that in mind, let's get down to the thing everyone loves, more math! Daizenshu 7 lists Tien and Yamcha's power levels during the Saiyan Saga at 1830 and 1480 respectively. I won't be including Chaozu in the calculations because after these three are wished back, the little guy doesn't really bother with the pretense of trying to be one of Earth's defenders anymore. Anyway, the journey to Namek took 34 days, with around 10 days or so of downtime for Capsule Corp to repair and refit Kami's spacecraft for the trip, and then 130 days before the three deceased warriors could be wished back to life. All in all, let's round it up to an even half a year. Under similar conditions, Krillin managed to achieve a battle power increase of 10 times in 1 year, so we probably wouldn't be remiss to assume half that growth for the others. This would place Tien at 9150 and Yamcha at 7400. In the canon, due to Krillin needing to be revived by Porunga and thus using up one of the resurrection options, Tien actually also had to stay an extra 130 days in Otherworld so as not to be separated from Chaozu. Since Krillin didn't die against Frieza in this timeline, and Gohan was able to be brought back with the wish made to Shenron, this is unnecessary, so he doesn't get the extra 130 days on King Kai's planet. Now, I've seen some folks make the case that Tien's growth would probably mirror Goku's own, if not be a little higher, as he made it to the end of Snake Way in record time compared to the Saiyan, had the benefit of training partners, and pursued a more specialized approach to his own training since he was not taught the Kaioken or the Spirit Bomb. However, while these points may hold true for canon, they do not for this timeline, as Tien and Yamcha had to devote a portion of their training to developing the ability to utilize both the full power technique and Kaioken for the purposes of learning Kaiohenshin. Also, while there probably isn't any need to state the obvious, the stuff with the Ginyu Force showing up to King Kai's planet was filler, and thus counts for nothing. Worry not that this situation will irreparably damage Yamcha and Tien's chances at being relevant, though, as I will be addressing an issue that never got proper coverage in the canon. That of unlock potential. Much like Kaioken, unlock potential is treated as a given for humans in Periphery media, but hardly touched after its first appearance on Namek, though the technique used by Elder Kai to unleash Gohan's ultimate potential in the Buu saga is implied to be related. Regardless, Tien and Yamcha returning to Earth with power levels lower than 10,000 would no doubt be perceived as more than a little lackluster, and so shortly after Goku's return to Earth, when he reveals his ability to use instant transmission, Krillin would do the pair a solid and tell them to go and speak to the new Grand Elder of the Namekians to see if they can tap into their hidden potential. There isn't anything in canon implying Mori can or cannot perform the technique just as Guru could, so for the purposes of this video, we're going to assume he can for the sake of storytelling. Upon having their potential unlocked, Yamcha and Tien receive a boost equivalent to Krillin's on Namek, an initial 2.5 times boost, followed by a 5.769 times increase over time after that. This places the new power ratings at the time of their resurrection at Tien with 131,965.875, rounded up to 132,000 to make things simple. Yamcha at 106,726.5, rounded up to 107,000. Power levels still seem a little on the low side, don't be fooled. The two of them are now in much better positions for growth than in canon, with higher base power and the ability to utilize Kaiohenshin up to a consistent ×2 and a limited ×4. And that's all before we have even launched into the 3-year time skip. As an added note, Goku himself opts not to receive the unlock during the visit. While we all know the boost would probably do wonders for Earth's strongest fighter, I think Goku would perceive it on principle, much in the same way he does the Super Saiyan God ritual in Battle of Gods and DB Super. Plus, he isn't feeling the same sort of urgency as when he pursued something similar, the Sacred Water, way back in Dragon Ball. And we all know Goku can often get more than a little arrogant about his own strength. We witnessed that much in his canon fights against Frieza, Perfect Cell, Majin Buu as Super Saiyan 3, and Super Buu, also as Super Saiyan 3 when Gotenks' time limit ran out and Super Buu reverted to a form that was mostly Piccolo. Yamcha isn't concerned about such views, and Tien accepts whatever power comes from the ritual is his own, just not yet fully realized. And I'm sure you're wondering, well, what about Piccolo and Vegeta? My take on it is this. Nail likely already had his potential unlocked when the Earthlings met him on Namek, hence his much larger power level than the other Namekian warriors we see. As my friend Masako X put it in one of his own discussion videos over on his channel, this could have resulted in the unforeseen consequence of unlocking Piccolo's own latent potential when the two fused, which is why Piccolo's power boost from the event was so enormous. Following that logic, Piccolo's power is already unlocked via the Namekian method. The only one that leaves out is Vegeta, who I still don't really see the Namekians offering a power boost of that nature to for some time. Plus, by this point, Vegeta's pride probably wouldn't allow him to seek it out if Goku has no intention to do so, as Kakarot managed to become a Super Saiyan without relying on such means. In the canon, it pretty much becomes the entire guiding principle of his life that if Kakarot can do something, he can do it better, and the only reason he ever even considered the shortcut to power offered by Babidi in the Buu saga was because he felt that he had grown too soft with Goku's absence in his life over the course of the long time skip. In this timeline, now that he has reluctantly begun to befriend a much stronger Krillin, thus giving him a second rival power to compete with while simultaneously improving his opinion of the potential of humanity, even if everything from this point forward were to proceed along a similar line to the Buu Saga scenario, which it won't, but let's not get ahead of ourselves, he wouldn't feel nearly so unsatisfied. Man, all that calculating and explaining, and we haven't even gotten to the meaty narrative stuff for the events of the time skip yet. And we still have a ways to go, because it's time to return to the subject of Gohan. More specifically, the subject of Gohan's post-Namek trauma, and the effect it has on his family. Upon his return to Earth, having received the news of the bad future from Bulla, Goku decides it's time to prepare. He approaches Piccolo, who agrees to train with him, but when the two of them attempt to bring Gohan into their training, Goku's wife puts her foot down. Hard. Goku learns that over the gap in time between Gohan's return from Namek and Goku's return from Yardrat, his son has been having horrible night terrors about his own death at the hands of Frieza. Because of this, Gohan's studies had not only been put on hold due to his mental and physical exhaustion, but he'd been experiencing even more problems with a little something we're all familiar with. His rage. At first, Chi-Chi had been unaware that her child had actually died on Namek, and it wasn't until the youth confessed to his mother about the nature of his own trauma that she even came to know. And this knowledge devastated her, for not only did it confirm that she had been right to oppose his journey to an alien world, it meant something much greater than that, something that in her heart she never wanted to believe. Goku would not always be capable of protecting their son. He'd been right there, and Frieza had picked Gohan up anyway. Goku tries to reassure his wife that there isn't any true danger. After all, they have advance notice this time, an opportunity to train, and if things did get really bad, they'd still have the Dragon Balls. This doesn't reassure her. What Gohan needs, in her eyes, isn't more exposure to Goku's violent and dangerous lifestyle. He needs therapy. What's more, her son seems to agree with the sentiment, as he has begun to become concerned that he may eventually hurt someone if things continue. When all's said and done, the three of them reach an agreement. Chi-Chi's going to take Gohan to stay with her at her father's home and have sessions with a therapist Bulma recommended. They'll figure out where to go from there after a few months. Now, I know this probably feels a little heavy for the Dragon Ball setting, and it kind of is. But this is the direction I always wanted to take this particular bit of the story. It never sat well with me how the canon chose to handle, or not handle, the very big issue of Gohan as a character. The child has seen and lived through some crazy horrible stuff throughout his very short life. All of it before the age of 7. Kidnapped twice, once by Raditz and again by Piccolo, forced to learn to fight, forced to watch others die, nearly killed on 2 occasions in canon, once in the Saiyan Saga against Nappa and once on Namek against Recoome, and actually killed by Frieza in this timeline. The boy should be seriously messed up. And so, I've chosen to actually address that. And I know, DBZ is shonen. That sort of thing is supposed to be a casual day for your typical shonen protag. But let's be real here. Even those shonen protagonists usually experience their major trauma by the time they're approaching puberty. They're resilient, rebellious, and high energy. Gohan isn't, and has never been, like the typical shonen protag, and furthermore, experienced all of his trauma at the age of an elementary schooler. There are gonna be some issues, and I would like to address them. With all of that drama firmly behind us, it comes time to look forward to the future that lies ahead, and the 3 years of preparation for the androids that Bulla warned of. Will Yamcha and Tien manage to catch up to their peers? And speaking of Yamcha, how will he react to the realization of Krillin and Bulma's deepening relationship? Will Vegeta still travel into space to try and achieve the Super Saiyan transformation? Or will his newfound connection with Krillin keep him on Earth to attempt a different means of attaining ascension? When shall Gohan be fit to return to training with his father and Piccolo? And how shall it affect them all and the uncertain future that lies before them? Find out next time on Dragon Ball AU. And if you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like, subscribe, ring the bell icon, and turn on all notifications. And if you'd like to help the channel grow further, consider becoming a patron. Those who do will not only be assisting me in assuring a consistent upload schedule, but will also earn some exclusive rewards. Thank you so much for viewing. See you next time!